can't see me, you Stevie. Wondering how I reach more evolutions than Eevee and make it look easy.
What is up, Earth's mightiest subscribers? It's Ernie, the Blerd without fear. Welcome back to the channel. And if you're new here and you like what you see, make sure you hit the subscribe button and tap that notification bell. Today's video, we are going to be talking about Phoenix #1, written by Stephanie Phillips, with art by Alessandro Miracolo, and color by David Curiel. We get a pretty solid introduction, or rather, reintroduction to Jean Grey, the Phoenix, in this issue. If you've not been keeping up with everything that has been going on with Jean as of late, or why she is the Phoenix again up to this point, I will point you into the direction of a video that maybe could help suss that out, or maybe it'll be a playlist. I'll burn that bridge once I cross it. But the point is that Jean Grey is the Phoenix once more, and I would even go as far as to say now and forever, she is the Phoenix. But if for whatever reason you are unfamiliar with Jean Grey as a character, this issue does a very good job of telling you who she is, showing you who she is even in some instances. And I would also go as far as to say that it's done pretty damn well, and not even through Jean's own words, but through the words of a narrator, a character by the name of Adon, who we're going to talk a little bit more about towards the end of the video. First and foremost, I really want to focus on Jean. And the good things to know just right off rip about this comic is that Psyche and Jean, if you are a person who is very invested in the relationships of fictional characters, which I am not normally, but in this particular instance, this is one that I actually thought was kind of cool. But Cyclops and Jean, their relationship is not done. They've not been split apart. They're not breaking up permanently or anything of that magnitude. They are very much still together, albeit Jean, because of the nature of this comic, she's going off into the far reaches of space, into the cosmos, to fight a cosmic threat. This means Cyclops can't be along for the ride. He has to lead the new X-Men. And in order to do that, he has to be on Earth. He can't be out running around gallivanting with Jean. Therefore, Jean is doing her own thing. They're not necessarily even taking a break on the relationship. They're staying in contact with one another telepathically, which I think is a lot of respect. Just real quick, I want to insert this on Jean Grey's name. One of the things that came up during the House of X era was just how good Jean had become at transmitting her thoughts, reading minds from across the cosmos. The idea that she's only gotten stronger since her death and resurrection, it just is more respect to her name if there's nothing else. This book also makes it clear, as I kind of alluded to earlier, that Jean Grey is now and forever the Phoenix. It doesn't matter who the you see with the crown, doesn't matter who you see on fire, whoever's walking around talking about how, oh, I'm the Phoenix right now. No, Jean is always the Phoenix. She has never not really truly been the Phoenix. Even when she doesn't have possession of the Phoenix Force in its entirety, she will and forever always be the Phoenix. That's just how intrinsically tied to one another they are. Even when Echo had it, didn't matter. Jean was still technically the Phoenix. She just didn't use the power in the way that you might expect. She still has that connection. It never goes away. Even if she's not able to express the full might of its power, she is still the Phoenix. And I appreciate the fact that this comic does a great deal of putting a lot of respect on Jean's name in that regard. This comic does a fantastic job of showing you the pathos of Jean Grey. And what I think is the real important part about this whole thing, the thing that Jean is having to contend with in this issue, is the return of a Marvel Comics villain that I would be shocked if anyone actually remembered who they were. It's a character by the name of Paricus. Paricus is a character who, if you are not familiar, and I would forgive you if you weren't, he is not really in a lot of comics. He has been in a total of 13 comics in his publication history, which technically starts in 1998. He's a Dan Jurgens creation. You used to see him a lot in the Thor Volume 2 comics from around that time frame. So yeah, I wouldn't expect anyone to know who he is, but for those who are the uninitiated, Paricus is a dark god and what is effectively the dark mirror of the Asgardian god. This was something that was dealt with during Dan Jurgens' run. Paricus is, for all intents and purposes, the dark god of unlimited power and infinite energy. Now, if you're wondering why it seems he only ever shows one arm, or his other arm is hidden under a cape, or if he even has another arm at all, if he's just a one-armed man walking around here, well, the fact of the matter is that this is intentional. Paricus only has one arm. Yes, he may be the god of infinite energy, but he is also the god who only has one arm, and it's because Thor cut the other arm off during the events of 2002's Thor number 53. Now, once again, this guy has only appeared in a handful of comics, but that said, his appearance here is no less impactful. He's been locked away for a long time. The Nova Corps have been keeping him under wraps. And this is something that kind of calls back to that Dan Jurgens run, because Adon had locked Paricus away and he never really told anyone where he was locked away at. We just knew that he was not around anymore. But now we know the Nova Corps were the people who had him under wraps. So it kind of makes all this stuff make sense. But I feel like what Stephanie Phillips is going to do here with this character, considering that they don't really have a deep history, in comics, like I said, they've only been in 13 comics, including this one. This is fertile ground for Stephanie to cook. And I feel like if you're going to get anything here, I feel like you're going to get a Paricus who might be a step above what you might expect if you are familiar with him from those previous Dan Jurgens comics. At the end of the day, this is a tale of a woman who has become a god, effectively, having access to the Phoenix Force, being one with the Phoenix Force. That is what Jean has become. She's become a god. The greatest peril for any god, especially a god who was once human, is how do you move in this new status quo? Like, what is the protocol for how you act now? Do you still act on your humanity, or do you now have to think above and beyond human understanding and comprehension? That is what this book, at least at its start, I'm not saying it's what it will be about entirely in its entirety, but I feel like that's definitely what's kicking off as, is Jean learning how to be a god. Because there's a very specific incident where she makes a choice. She has to make this choice on the fly, in the heat of the moment. And as our narrator, Adon, points out, she doesn't make the choice as a god. She makes the choice as a human. And one of the things I feel like, especially if you are familiar with Jean Grey as a character, I probably don't have to tell you this, but if you are not as familiar, Jean Grey is considered one of the hearts and souls of the X-Men. Like, very few other characters express their humanity on a level similarly to Jean Grey. Like, you have characters like Nightcrawler, Storm, and so on, but I would say they all stand about shoulder to shoulder with her when it comes to expressing humanity and morality. And one of the things I personally find very interesting about this too is technically her inaction, as some might see it, it does create this situation where she has to fight someone who is on the same level as Paricus, a god of unlimited energy. And I think that's a very interesting fight to have, is a fight between someone who is literally life, death, and rebirth, and all that that entails, a cosmic entity like no other, going against someone who is literally the god of unlimited and unchecked power. You would imagine this would make for a pretty interesting fight. But whether or not Jean Grey can compartmentalize her newfound place as a god with her humanity, if she is ever able to square that circle, everything that she is doing right now is leading her on a collision course with the narrator of this comic. This is actually something that, well, technically you get a taste of it in the issue itself, but you have to go see the bonus page. This is something that Marvel is doing right now with the X-Men comics. I don't know if it's something they're gonna be doing permanently, but at least for the #1 issues, we've seen this with Jed MacKay's X-Men #1. We're seeing it with, Phoenix #1. We'll probably see it with all of them on some level or another. But if you scan the QR code at the back of the book, you will be able to see a bonus page on Marvel's website that will give you a little more context to the future of things to come. Similar to how we saw with X-Men #1, we were more formally, I won't say formally because we really didn't get to see everything, but we were more introduced to the new villains of Jed MacKay's X-Men 3K. Well, we're also getting an introduction to Adon, a proper one. When we see her in this comic proper, it is mostly in flashback. And now we see that, a little bit of time has passed, and it's kind of difficult to say exactly how much, but basically the long and short of it is, it seems like Adon is not happy with her. We don't know exactly how this particular part happens, because when we're first introduced to Adon, she seems to be a child, but because of the fact that Jean Grey let Paricus go in order to save the prisoners and the Nova Corps' prison, the Kiln 2, well, apparently this led to Paricus going to Adon's home planet, and unaliving her father. And this has kind of left her in a very, very specific state. And it's here where we notice throughout the book, Adon is basically telling us that she knows Jean Grey, that she has gotten to know Jean Grey in some ways that only a friend or an enemy would be able to do. And I find it interesting when we see Adon, she seems to be probably no older than 10, maybe 12, possibly 13 or 14 years old at most. And then we see someone who is very likely her in this bonus page, who at the very least appears to be in her late teens. This is probably gonna be some wibbly wobbly timey wimey going on here. I'm not really sure. It could even all be theater of the mind for all we know. And hell, it could even not be Adon at all, but I feel like this is Adon. I could be wrong here. I might be misreading the tea leaves, but I do see some very interesting stuff here where they're showing Jean Grey taking on Gore the God Butcher, who for all intents and purposes is supposed to not be the God Butcher anymore. So I'm very curious to see how that is going to play out. Also fighting what could potentially be Draugr. I'm not really 100% sure here, but ultimately at the end of it all, I'm pretty sure some of this has to do with some cosmic telepathy, whammy stuff going on here. That's my guess at least. But I can't wait to see what Stephanie does with this in terms of how she is going to pit Jean and Adon against one another. But I'm even more interested to see what's going to be the relationship between these characters even prior to this, because it seems like there was something there. There's lots of little hints and teases and nods that they're not just foes, that they've gotten to know one another, that they've had conversations that weren't during a fist fight. So I can't wait to see how this is going to play up, especially considering that it seems as though Adon doesn't necessarily, at least in this particular bonus page, has even decided whether or not she is going to try to get revenge on Jean Grey. As she says, it's not whether or not Jean Grey will find peace, but whether or not she deserves it. She's not here to pass out vengeance. No, she's here to pass out judgment, which I think is something even far more dangerous. Now, as to what exactly is going to lead to the final scene with Jean and Cyclops' father, Corsair, the leader of the Starjammers, as well as the Black Order behind her. It is something that we know is setting up the things to come. We know that the Black Order is going to be featuring in the next few issues of this book. We also know Jean is going to be meeting up with Corsair. There's no insight on any of this. All we know is that the Black Order is out there. They are very likely going to wind up fighting Jean Grey before they join her, because, that's just how comics are, and they are typically villains, so it would track, at least in this instance. And, well, Corsair, that's his little daughter-in-law, so of course he's going to ride with her, though I'm pretty sure she's going to have a lot to say to him about how he has treated his son before that is all said and done. Whatever is happening here in this shot, this is really just a taste of things to come. How the Universal Church of Truth will factor into this any further than what it already has, I don't know if it will, but I do feel like there was definitely some social commentary on how organized religion, and not even just organized religion itself, but even more specifically, religious cults can lead people to do some really dumb shit. Overall, this is a solid first entry. Say what you will about the Fall of X and where it wound up ultimately by the end of the Krakoan era, but I can definitely say this: the X-Men, and by proxy the Phoenix especially, are in good hands. I know some people aren't happy with how the X-Men just relaunched as just another comic, but here's the thing. This was a no-win situation. I don't think anyone was going to be pleased one way or the other, because you're going to have camps who are still salty that the Krakoan age ended. Now you're also going to have people who are going to also complain that, oh, well, the House of X era began with a 10-part, limited series or whatever, big major story arc, and this just started with just one single old flimsy issue. Well, here's the thing. If they tried to copy Jonathan Hickman's homework, every last single person in this comment section, everyone in your local comic shop, and everyone on comic Twitter and comic threads and comic TikTok, wherever, you all would be cooking Marvel shit, saying, oh, look, they're just reheating Jonathan Hickman's leftovers. That's what y'all will be saying. So this is an unenviable situation. And honestly, I'm glad that they're not trying to go back to the trappings of an era they literally just ended. Just let this shit be what it is. I say this all the time. Nobody hates X-Men like X-Men fans. You can actually apply that logic to pretty much any fandom in existence. You can apply it to Spider-Man, Batman, Star Wars, Avengers, Doctor Who. Star Trek Battlestar Galactica, whoever, whatever. You can literally apply that logic to anything. But I often say it here for X-Men. No one hates X-Men like X-Men fans. So I'm honestly just ignoring a lot of the discourse I've been seeing people have, because a lot of it is disingenuous at best. And yeah, I'm enjoying this too much to even care. You guessed it, obligatory channel outro time. If you're not subscribed to the channel, consider doing so. Clicking that subscribe button and tapping that notification bell ensures that you get more videos just like this one, and you don't miss any of my other content that I drop throughout the week, plus my live streams every Thursday and Saturday. And if you enjoyed the video, make sure you click that like button, keep it plus ultra, and sound off in the comments.